Hello, everybody, and welcome to the making digital credentials a part of your L&D strategy. Today, we'll be looking at what credentialing is, how it can help L&D and talent teams, and what the practical steps are to deploying credentials in your business. This afternoon, I'm joined by Nina, our account director. I'm joined by Jez, who's head of consulting, and by David, who's lead solutions architect. If you'd like to pop any questions into the chat, we'll be able to discuss those as we go. And now, over to the team.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining us today. Before we sort of move on with the presentation, I'd really love your input on the first slide. So what I'd like to do is to tell us your name and what skill you have that may not be directly relevant to your role, could be useful to your organisation, and people would be surprised to know. So if you want to pop that into the chat panel, that would be really handy. We'd love to know what kind of hidden skills you might have beyond your immediate role. I'll share mine. I don't have any that are immediately relevant to my role, but I did used to be a farmer. So if anybody needs a sheep lambed or a cow calved, I'm your lady to ask and I can come and help. So that's my hidden skill. So let's get a few of those in the chat panel so that we can then take a look at what your hidden skills are. Thank you, Rory. So you're an FA football coach. So that would imply that we should be making good of your coaching skills within an organisation. And we've got another one there. Karen, also a coach for run clinics. Excellent. So more coaching skills coming through in people's recreational activities. Carl can get his legs behind his neck. Could be entertaining on a dull day at work, perhaps. A very useful skill. We've got some kickboxing in there. That would imply a bit of toughness and perseverance. And Marissa, excellent. So journalist, was as a project manager in Learning Now. So excellent. So good writing skills, good investigative skills, very handy in the learning and development space. So the point of asking this question is really to help people to realise that all of us in one shape or another have a set of skills that may or may not be relevant to our immediate role, but if we had greater visibility of them, perhaps would unearth the opportunity for us to use those skills across further careers or within the organisation that we are in at the moment. And in most instances, what we find is that our skills are narrowed by the immediate competency requirements of the role that we work within. And actually what we want to be looking to do is to unearth all those hidden skills in individuals and look at how we make good of those skills across organisations, making us as individuals more portable and more relevant to the people that we work with today. So hopefully just that little exercise has just got you thinking a little bit about your skills that are presently hidden and how they might be able to be more useful to the organisation that you work within. So to get the session started, I'm Nina Brebner, as mentioned by Sam, and I'm an account director here at Kineo. And I'm going to be sharing the bulk of the session with Jess Anderson, who is our head of consultancy. And then David Shaw will be joining us a little bit later to give you a demo of the technology that can underpin the principles of credentialing. So what are we going to cover today? Key topics are, what is credentialing? I'm aware that some of you may already be knowledgeable in this space. We didn't want to assume that everybody didn't need a little bit of a recap, so we will cover that off. Why we think you should be adopting credentialing. What is it that you could be credentialing? So from programs to memberships and more. And then we'll have 3 steps to a successful implementation. And we'll then close off the session with a little bit of an intro into the credentialing technology. So what is credentialing? So credentialing ultimately is the evolution of the certificate format. It's a digital image that's rich in metadata, inclusive of all the evidence and the basis of which people have been issued their credential. It allows you to recognise all kinds of learning and achievements in a much more granular way than the good old-fashioned certificate that would have told you what you were issued, who by, and on what date. It can't be lost, so it's stored for life inside a free profile, and ultimately the important thing is that they are verified skills. It can be shared online. We are all part of a world now where we promote ourselves online through LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. And this enables us to promote ourselves through LinkedIn with verifiable skills and credentials. All the information travels with the badge, so it's not just about the certificate, as we mentioned, about why you got it and on what date. It's about all the reasons why it was given to you in the first place. It can be used to unlock opportunities and make people much more discoverable. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through the presentation. We've got a really good example about the nuclear sector in this space. And employers, providers can verify evidence which hasn't been possible with paper certificates. So it's incredibly valuable for employers and providers to be able to say, I'm confident that this isn't just you telling me that you have these skills, it is other people confirming that you have these skills too. And that makes it significantly more valuable. And for an organisation, whether you are a training provider, an institution or a corporation, it's about the promoting and sharing of your brand. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. So what are the key things that can support credentialing? So the first one is micro-recognition and aggregation of skills. There's a really nice example of this with the World Chef Organization, where they use micro-recognition of small skills, which then build up and are aggregated into a master qualification. So it's about being able to recognize much more granular skill sets than we do at the moment. It's about supporting those people on the call today who sit within talent and learning and development. It's about making skills far more visible than they are at the moment, supporting your ability for successful succession planning and talent matching. If there's anybody on this call today that's what we would classify as an extended enterprise supplier, so that's anybody who is supporting an audience beyond their immediate remit, that could make you a training provider, an institution, or even a corporation, so someone like Weller, for instance, who provides training to a wider audience than their staff, or Samsung, who like to train up people in their technology, then it's a great way of being able to promote your brand, but also recognise the skills that that audience gains from working closely with your brand. It's about encouraging self-development and engagement in self-development. If people have a better understanding as to why they need to do something, the value it brings to them and how it might contribute to a wider journey, it will engage them and incentivise them more in their own personal development journey. The potential to increase speed to competency. When we have a credential that not only displays the skills that you have, but in a verified, certified way, it means organisations that you go to work with, or you as an organisation, can be much more confident about the quality or the level of the skill the person you are hiring holds, which means you can focus much more of your attention on the gaps between where they are at the moment and where you need them to be the best for your organisation. When we look at the ability to promote those skills through credentials, it enables you as an organisation to promote yourself as an investor in people. It creates a currency around skills, something that is much more valuable than just being able to say, I'm great on a CV. It creates a currency that you can then trade into jobs and further qualifications as you progress through your career. It validates skills with a meaningful standard. Now, that standard could just be you attended something, but it also could be that it's been validated against a particular objective, quality, assessment, workplace or online assessment, but it's the fact that there was a meaningful standard put against that learning or that activity that has then been verified. And most importantly, it transfers from both internal and external organisation. It makes you more portable within your existing organisation and also makes you more visible and more portable outside of the organisation. Just over the next couple of slides, mentioned about making you an investor in people. This slide is just an example of where you can then see the credential against people's email footers, but also on LinkedIn, and then the profile itself, which is held online. And that empowers people to then curate their relevant skills and promote them onto pages to suit their career objectives. But actually, most importantly for you as organisations, it's the fact that they're data rich and trackable. As an organisation, you can track the level of engagement with particular skills or competencies, the progression that people are making through them, the sharing and destination points, so where are people most commonly promoting their skills using credentials, and you're able to track your brand reach. So where is your brand most being adopted and how much are people interacting with your brand? So in summary, credentials are the glue between talent and learning and development. Many of our customers are engaged in conversation with us over the desire to implement a refreshed learning culture with a technology suite that underpins and enables that culture. We talk extensively about autonomous learning, where we empower learners to take a greater responsibility for their learning needs. The driver for this approach is to enable learners to stay more relevant in their market, but also to move their skills alongside the rapid rate of strategic change in businesses. A fundamental part of this shift is taking some of the ownership away from learning professionals to design and implement all the learning solutions for their audiences, and to procure and curate content that is made readily available at the point of need and easily curated by the learner to meet their specific personal requirements. This approach places greater emphasis on the quality of the talent and performance process, whereby objectives are tighter aligned to learning and skills, behaviours and competencies, and more readily identified on a granular level to meet the immediate needs of the learning in conjunction with the needs of businesses. Credentialing acts as the glue between all these areas. It creates visibility of skills, behaviours and competencies acquired through all learning and workplace activities. They enable learners to establish how a collection of credentials can contribute to a larger skill set. They enable the talent process to align learning to strategic needs beyond the immediate competency framework of a role, and finally enable greater portability of skills across sectors, inside businesses to meet the needs of new initiatives or roles. I mentioned earlier about a great example around nuclear. One example is we were discussing with a nuclear customer the shortage of nuclear skills coming through academia. They have now needed to go to market and seek adaptable skills from outside of their sector. The conversation with them focused on the role of credentials in enabling a more granular recognition of skills that would enable them to more easily see how someone's past experience may translate to their more present needs. And we'll talk more about this as we cover off various case studies inside the presentation. So on that note, I am going to pass you over to Jez, who's going to talk to you more about what are you credentialing.
Hello, everybody. So as Nina says, I'm Jez Anderson. I'm the head of consulting here at Kineo, and I've been fortunate enough to be involved in quite a few credentialing conversations with clients and prospective clients around it. So for me, this next section is really important, is what are people's experience, and then ultimately going into how do you go about doing that. And I think looking at real practice and looking at what people are actually doing with credentials is key to understanding if it's going to be right for you. So in some ways, if you look at these 6 boxes, what that does is that this is based on our experience. These are the things that people are using credentials for at the moment. It's not an exhaustive list, and I'm sure over time the list will increase. But what we're finding is that increasingly our clients are looking at it in one of the, and it falls into one of these 6 categories. So if we just break them down slowly and in some detail, gives you a sense of what's involved. So from a competency framework point of view, it's looking at how do you utilize a credentialing system or a framework of credentials to look at an existing competency framework, a set of behaviors, a set of skills or capabilities, which is important to you as an organization, and then appointing and aligning a credentialing system next to that. So giving people an opportunity to be recognized and valued for the skills that they have, or the experiences that they have, or the knowledge that they have around a particular competency framework or set of behaviors that you want people to exhibit. Memberships, we work increasingly with membership organisations who see the inherent value and the great value that credentials have for their organisations. The ability to recognise different levels of membership, different levels of skill, different levels of expertise within their membership structure, but then overlay that against their rigorous standards and quality marks that they want to put against it. So they would brand their own credentials against their quality standards, and very clearly they would communicate through the credential itself, through that digital badge, what it is that people have done to achieve that standard. Not only then does it create brand recognition for them as a membership organisation, but it gives real clarity to what that level of membership means for the individual. Qualifications and certifications. We've all got certificates, and I'm sure if I asked around this group that are listening today, could you put your hands on your paper certificates that you earned either at university or at school or wherever? Some might, some would, some of you would be able to, some others wouldn't. And over time we lose these important pieces of paper. Ultimately, they are just that. They are just a piece of paper. They are just some words on a sheet, which mean not a lot to an individual unless you were part of that process. Whereas a digital credential clearly gives you the underpinning knowledge, the metadata that's behind the title, or and it provides a description of what you've done and how you've done it. So a very clear opportunity to look at using credentials to support qualification certificates. Where skills and behaviours are important and need to be measured, it's an opportunity for maybe non-accredited routes of training. So if you've got an existing training programme within an organisation, it's quite common for people to start to think about aligning a credential next to that. And that may well be part of an overall blend of credentials in line with practice in the workplace versus training as well, that people will get recognised for. Accredited quality services, so where that's really important, and that might be an internal and external standard. It might be something that an organisation wants to state clearly as their perspective, as their view on how a standard or how a piece of work needs to be delivered, how a skill or competency needs to be demonstrated. And Nina will touch on IBM in a little while, and IBM is one of our case studies. And look at how they use credentialing as part of their overall structure of recognition. And then finally, compliance frameworks. It's a great opportunity. It's a great way to show proof that somebody is demonstrating or has demonstrated the skills to ensure that they are compliant with legislation or with individual policies. So there's lots of core reasons for that, and I think the key is for you is asking what it is that you would want to get out of a credentialing before moving down to the route of adopting the system. By clearly understanding what it is that you want to do, then it helps you articulate the value to your organisation, but also to the individual. I want to quickly just share with you what we're doing internally at City and Guilds. So we ourselves have adopted a credentialing system, and we're in the pilot phase, and we're quite open about that. But that pilot's involves at the moment engaging and motivating over 1,300 staff, looking at how we credential the skills, the attributes, the knowledge which are important to us as an organisation. This initial pilot's called See My Skills, and its whole purpose is to look at how do we bring to life our strategic objectives for 2020. So looking at those four core objectives there, we're looking at using the credentialing system, want to raise awareness of the skills and share them across the group around that 2020 ambition, so they become more than just words on a piece of paper, but enabling people to highlight their own skills against these key priorities. It enables people to feel empowered about what they're doing towards achieving that objective, but it also gives visibility and recognition by colleagues, both within their parts of the group, but also maybe more wider, that how the work that they're doing and how that contributes to what our overall goals as an organisation are. Effectively, it helps develop the business, and it helps not only in terms of best practice, but provides insights and analysis around the organisation as to how people do what they do, and ultimately it creates some great advocacy for all our brands across the organisation as a whole. So in terms of the structure, it gives us the whys behind that, so why it's important. It helps us deliver our purpose. It makes people, in some ways, it's helping people to be more efficient and effective in what they deliver, and improving collaboration across our brands by people sharing a common language and a common understanding about what skills are important to us as an organisation. It helps us make sure that we are aligned in terms of what the ambitions of the organisation and the group are towards the behaviours that have been demonstrated. But it also equally gives people an opportunity to look at how they contribute and at a local level towards those more strategic goals, and be recognised both by their management but also by the group as a whole. The framework in terms of that is quite simple. So how it works is that the individual would choose what it is that they're doing, or what it is that they believe that their contribution, how that contribution fits. They would then look at the criteria, and basically they submit a proposal of how they've met that to a panel. That panel is made up of volunteers from across the group who consider each application against that criteria and either award it or not, as the case may be. If it's not, then people go away and do some more work and resubmit. But it's a great way for people to start to share and think about what it is that they do and share what it is that they do with others. And we're very keen to look at testimonials and real life application of skills through projects. So it's genuinely looking at how people have shown what it is they do, and not just about a knowledge. That's quite a complex map, which I'm not going to talk through, but ultimately what we're trying to do is demonstrate that a credentialing system with rigor has value. And I think the fact that our pilot has got 1,300 people involved in it already is good evidence of that. And we're definitely moving on to the next steps in terms of it. So we've talked about, I suppose, in some ways to set the context of what credentialings are about, and importantly, we're going to offer 3 steps. It's always 3. It's always the rule of 3s is always good. So in those 3 steps, it's about 3 questions. It's why, it's what, and it's how. So why is credentialing? Why is it that you want to adopt a credentialing system in the first place? That's the first question. The second question we'll go on to is, what are you wanting to credential? So being really clear about what it is that you want to credential, to recognise through your credentialing system. And then the third question will be, how will you go about doing it? So by just sharing a little bit of our experience and our insight, hopefully that gives you a sense of, is credentialing right for you? It's not right for all organisations as they sit now. But there's the potential that down the line it could well become an important integral part of your learning and development, or your talent development strategy. I think what underpins this, and especially when we talk about the why, is the value. And it's about, how do you recognise value of an individual, but also how does the organisation see that, and how does the organisation recognise the value to themselves of adopting a credentialing process. So to an individual, the value comes about from, do they look at the credential and see that it gives them something in return? To the organisation, it's about what does that demonstrate to the wider marketplace, or to the wider world, how that credentialing will work for them. So these are the key things that we've identified as being why, and why people are move towards delivery of credentials. So an improved market presence, which sounds a bit odd, but ultimately, I think, as Nina's already alluded to, it's about your brand being seen as part of a credentialing system. It's been worn as people's personal badges on their personal profiles, which can get seen more widely. People then can look at what's behind that data and understand what it is that you've done to generate and reward that individual. It's an opportunity to save money, which sounds, again, it's not just in terms of efficiency and effectiveness of individuals, but also in removing some of the bureaucracy that may well be attached with accredited routes of training. There's evidence to demonstrate that credentialing systems improve staff retention, but also are valuable to individuals, that those organisations which are demonstrating a more granular approach to how they recognise skills and capabilities, and show that through a credentialing process, have an increased staff retention and find it easy to recruit people. Clear market differentiation. One of our key examples is a marketing agency who used their credentialing system. They didn't deliberately use it to stand out in their sector. It was originally to look at how do they retain staff, but ultimately the system became so successful that it's seen as being best practice within their sector. And clients now look at that as a key differentiation. So when they're going out for competitive tenders, the fact that they have this credentialing system which recognises individual granular skills, that's seen as setting them out, higher above other competitors. Improve skills and visibility and mobility. So it's looking at how do we to create a more visible understanding of what those granular skills are. Clearer career roadmaps, so it gives an opportunity for people to see how what they're doing in the workplace can, when pulled together into a portfolio of credentials, enable and help them develop their personal careers. One of the key things that we find, especially with more younger members of the workforce, is that the lack of clarity around what their career pathway is. Credentialing helps address some of that. Improve learner autonomy. It's giving people an opportunity to make choices of where their learning is, and it clearly a clearer way to communicate training standards and the speed to competency. The what. So I mean, in some ways, the what is it. You know, what are you seeking to credential? And I think as we've already looked at, the options are fairly wide. Is it a single program? Is it a framework of skills? Is it behaviours, competences with particular goals and vision? Is it knowledge? Is it about membership? Is it about attendance? In reality, the choice is up to you. The fact is, it comes back down again to what does the individual value. If they're going to put some effort into achieving a credential, what will make it worthwhile for them as an individual to do that? What's in it for them, if you like, and how do you create that currency? So the wheel to the right hand side of the slide gives you a good indication of one of our clients, how they've adopted credentialing, and it's a process from aware through to informed through to practicing, and each of those 3 steps of that wheel has different credentials attached to them, each at different levels, and ultimately an individual works through from being self-aware of the skills that are required, through to informed through training, and then ultimately into practicing them as the practitioner. And then there's a series of credentials that are attached to each one. And it's by pulling all this together into this taxonomy, this structure of credentials, which really starts to add value to the individual on lots of levels. Equally, it's very clear for when working with other organisations, when talked about what their strategy is for developing and rewarding people, they have this very clear process that is easily demonstrable to them. So it really does provide an opportunity to create structure around competency, skills, experience, knowledge in a way which previously might have been difficult to communicate and articulate beyond the organisation. So I'm going to hand back to Nina, who's going to cover off the next question, which is how will you implement credentials? So and get into some of the nuts and bolts of the next steps. Over to you, Nina.
Brilliant, thanks, Jez. And Robert and Rob, just let you know, we'll pick up your 2 bits of feedback around where you see the value of credentials at the end of the session. So thank you so much for contributing to our question in the forum. Anybody else wants to chip in, please do. It'd be really, really great to see where you are recognising the value as part of this presentation. So how will you implement credentials? Step 3, just outlining really the key headlines of the things that are really important to think about when you're wanting to implement credentials. One is, and probably the most important first step, is about understanding what the measurement of success is. There's absolutely no value in moving ahead with this if we don't understand ultimately what that success criteria is. And that should be relatively easy to identify if we know what the overall objectives is of credentials in the first place. So understanding what the objective is, and we've covered a lot of what those potential objectives might be as part of this presentation, and then ultimately aligning some kind of success measurement to them. Identifying who the credential owners are. This will vary for each of you depending on where you're choosing to align your credentials. If we use Rob's example around the charity work and looking at cost-effective ways to recognise and applaud teams, it's possible that that will ultimately sit more within learning and development, and possibly even within team leadership, where people can recognise and applaud people at a much more local level for the things that they contribute on a day-to-day basis. If we were to look at Robert, I think that's McCleavey, I'll apologise if I pronounced it wrong. If we look at your example, Rob, in the forum, then yours will potentially be much more closely associated with the performance and talent process and how that then supports HR around succession planning. So that would mean that yours would sit more within the talent and HR community. So it's thinking about what's your strategy for credentials, and then who are the people who are going to ultimately own and enforce that strategy for you. When you've identified what it is that you're wanting to measure using credentials, it's about understanding the standard and the rigor that sits behind that. One of the things we want to be very clear about, and one of the reasons we don't use the word badges too often, is that what differentiates for us between badges and credentials is that badges was born out of gamification and incentivizing people to either do more learning or to game more, either of those. And what we want to identify with credentialing is that although it is a digital badge, it is attached to some kind of standard and rigor. And as such, it's really important that that's identified as part of the implementation process. Following on from that, you can then start to map out what the process for acquiring credentials is. In the City and Guilds example, we're focusing very much on the types and skills and behaviours that sit outside of the role but are critical to the success of our 2020 vision. And as such, a process has been put in place to manage that, which is outside of the standard talent process. If you're wanting to purely put it against particular programmes, then there needs to be a process of measuring how those skills were acquired during the programme. If you're wanting to put it against your performance process, then the right people need to understand how that weaves into your annual performance process. Moving on from there, we would always highly recommend that you move ahead with some kind of pilot approach. So it's then about designing out what that pilot approach looks like. Again, is this piloting for a particular programme? If we look at one of our customers who's an institution, their pilot was much more focused towards their memberships. If we look to the Will example that Jez just went through, where the 3 categories of learning, that was about being able to recognise that knowledge is just as valuable as application at times. And so they've categorised it against learning. So it's about identifying what's your pilot audience and your pilot's deliverable, and then how that pilot will run. One of the most important successes around the implementation of credentials is around your campaign of communication. What we have learned through this is that it can at times be the most neglected part of our customers' implementation strategy. And the consequence of that is that they successfully issue large numbers of credentials, but the consequence is that the uptake of those credentials is very low. And ultimately, one of the success criteria with this will be how much are people adopting the credentials that you're issuing. They have the right to accept or reject or ignore a credential that's been issued to them. And you want to see really good value coming from people adopting those credentials. And of course, seeing the value in them, that they're then starting to share those credentials out into their social networks. The diagram that I've put up in front of you is a classic diagram that's used by marketing for drawing people in and turning them into advocates of particular products. And those methods are just as applicable in learning as they are with credentialing. All of your audience, when you first start to issue credentials, are in fact a stranger. And as such, part of the implementation role is to start to attract and plant seeds around what the value of credentials is to them and why they should start to adopt them. What we want to do is to convert strangers into visitors, so they become an audience of people who periodically come back looking for more credentials that might aid them in their professional goals or securing their position within their present organisation. Moving on from visitors, we want to channel them in as part of their learner, and that is that they uses the power of credentials to create more motivated learners. So they've started visiting and understanding the value of credentials against particular learning initiatives, and now they're starting to do more learning because they can see the more learning they do, the more credentials they get, the more it aids their career progression and the decisions that they can make around their future. And most importantly, we want to convert that end audience into advocates. We want them to encourage other people to do more learning or to be more engaged with their own performance and talent process. We want them to publicly promote their credentials because that aids you in the promotion of your brand. And most importantly, we don't want them to just come back once. We want them to come back again and again, looking at the opportunities available to them as part of the credentialing process. That's very valuable to organisations who are selling learning and they want to keep a life cycle with their customers. And it's very valuable for people from an internal organisation perspective, where they want people to be really invested in their learning and talent process. So just to recap on what we've just talked about, key implementation process is create your value and success statement for credentials, so you understand why you're doing it and what that means. Outline ownership of the credentialing process, so who's going to own it and how does that map into the overall process. Consider your pilot audience. Think about low-hanging fruit with fast measurable success. So who's your easiest audience to target, or is there a particular initiative that is more important to your organisation than others? Design the credentials into the chosen delivery method. So the design process varies slightly depending on whether you're targeting membership, learning programs, applying this at talent level, or whether it's a wider part of your L&D strategy. Finally, design your communication and advocacy plan, as we talked about just a moment ago. And then there should be an implement, measure and repeat process. So whether you're starting with a pilot or whether you're starting to roll into your key implementation, must be using the data available to you to understand where value is being gained, where it's not being successful, what the communication approach is that needs to drive that forward, and then to continue to measure and repeat that periodically so that you're making a success of embedding credentials as part of your organisational culture. So hopefully that gives you a sort of top line around the implementation approach for credentials. Not wanting to be somebody who pitches to you, but if you are interested more in the implementation and design process, there will be a webinar hopefully a bit later in the year that will go through the specifics of designing credentials into programs, etc. The last bit I'm going to talk you through before I hand you over to David is just to talk you a bit through the IBM case study, so you've got a bit more background into a different type of organisations. We've mentioned some snippets of customers along the way. We've talked about the City and Guilds example, and now we'll just talk you through a little bit with IBM. So background, IBM is a global company, for those of you who are not that familiar, where innovation is at the core of strategy. The company focuses on technologies that transform their clients, including AI for business, cloud platforms, cybersecurity, and blockchain. With operations in more than 170 countries and global partner ecosystem, IBM and its network need to attract and retain the industry's most capable, flexible, and talented workforce to solve customer problems and deliver what they deem to be dynamic insights for business, governments, and not-for-profit organisations. The IBM Global Skills Initiative organises and delivers the most current learning opportunities to ensure the workforce of IBM and its partners keep their skills current and competitive in a fast-paced IT economy. So the key challenges for IBM was around emerging technology, which was constantly requiring new and more liquid skills. These were in spaces like cloud and cognitive big data require not only new skills, but also liquid skills to keep pace with rapidly evolving technology development. In 2014, technology evolved at a rate of 18 months. By 2016, it began to evolve and launch within just 12 weeks or less. IBM had to rethink how they would meet the market demand for talent. One of their other challenges was around a changing workforce. New collar jobs that require specialist skills, but not necessarily a traditional college degree, required a new credentialing process. As a global company, IBM needed the ability to find skilled experts with verifiable, timely, and portable credentials by location. Decentralized IT, so information technology at an organizational level, is changing. Line of business jobs now require IT skills, and organizations are facing a surge of shadow IT, in which information technology systems and solutions are built and used inside organizations without explicit organizational approval. As IT becomes more decentralized, IBM was looking for a way to recognize and verify the skills and competencies required within non-classic IT teams. And finally, developing and verifying that talent. So to maintain confidence in IBM solutions and to meet its strategic goals, developing and verifying competencies and skills is very important to the whole of IBM and their current ecosystem. So what was the solution? These challenges required IBM to create new credential structure to signal and surface capability. The company looked to digital badges as a solution as it provides IBM with a number of key things around timely verified credentials, the ability to track skills at a much more nano level than qualifications can, and being able to differentiate skills whilst also keeping a complete view of what those broad set of skills are. IBM leaders sought a digital badging solution that offered more than seamless sharing to popular online destinations. They needed a platform to meet key requirements, including rigorous and authoritative badging that is verifiable, trusted, and evidence-based, a complete view of an individual's knowledge, skills, and abilities, and this represents his or her discrete skills along with broader competencies and certifications. And that really emphasizes a lot of the things that we've talked about today in today's session. Diverse badge issuing and management options through integration. So they have a number of APIs that enable them not only to issue, but also to have expiration dates, replace and revoke badges once they've been issued. For them, interoperability and openness of the badge that could be easily shared to professional networks was valuable to their overall brand spread. Powerful data analytics and reporting features that enable IBM to produce global heat maps of talent, so they can now have full visibility of talent globally, not just inside their organization, but outside of it as well. There's linkage with talent acquisition and HR systems to enhance visibility and understanding of an employee career planning and progression. So that fits in really nicely with your statement, Rob, around that connection between talent and succession planning and how that's achieved through greater visibilities of nano skills. And the ability to support IBM in promoting its digital credential program to build awareness of their brand and how they can support individuals. So just to put some statistics behind that so that you have a sense of the value that it's been bringing, at pilot launch in 2015, IBM offered 4 types of digital badges across learning and certification tracks, representing foundational, intermediate, advanced, and expert level skills and competencies. So very similar to what Jez was talking about with the will, and where we were segmenting particular types of learning and skills into categories, IBM has taken a very similar approach to that. As badging became more integral to the organization's training and recognition approach, IBM rapidly expanded the types of badged activities. While this expansion has focused primarily on learning and certification, the program now includes recognition of essential contribution and advocacy-based programs. In 2018, there are more than 1,600 different badged activities available for individuals to engage with via the IBM brand. Since the programme launched, the IBM ecosystem of employers and consumers has overwhelmingly embraced digital credentials. As of 2018, the programme has more than 350,000 badge earners and 1 million badges have been issued. The rapid adoption of badging programme has also spurred increased awareness of IBM's learning and certification programmes. Digital badges are easily shared to professional networking sites. And as of early 2018, IBM's programme has garnered more than 200 million social media impressions. So this is the amount of which people are interacting with their brand via social media thanks to credentials. This organic social sharing is the equivalent of $39,000 per month in marketing value, and it's not costing them $39,000 per month, which is amazing. So that gives you a little bit of insight into IBM and hopefully a sense that actually this is a very scalable thing from something like City and Guilds or the interest around the nuclear sector into something that can really push you out beyond the market. Now, just for the last part of this presentation, I'm going to hand you over to David Shaw, and he's going to take you through a short demo of how the platform works, because we've talked a lot about the process and the theory. What we want to show you is that this can be a lot easier than it might have sounded today. So over to you, David.
Thank you very much. So as Nina's just finished with a demo of IBM, I will go over to IBM. Let me just log in. I expect this is going to throw me out when I log back in. So let me just quickly log back in. No, I think we're good. No, we're absolutely brilliant. Okay, so I'll talk you through what a learner sees, or what the public sees about the individual who's earned the badges, what that person can do with their badges and how they can share them, and then from a business's point of view, how that business looks like within this platform, which is Acclaim. So from a, here we go, I do need to sign in. You log me out. Excuse me while I can't talk and type at the same time.
Not multi-skilled, David.
No, I'm afraid not.
Blimey.
In a lot of things, but not in typing and talking. There we go. Okay, so as a learner, or as somebody that's earned these badges, I've got my own page within Acclaim. I can share this page with the outside world. I can also choose what is seen on this page from the badges that I've earned. As you can see up here, I can choose my own URL within the URL. That didn't make sense, but you know what I mean. And from within here, I can then put my badges up. So somebody can come in here, a potential employer, for instance, can come in, have a look at the badges I've got, follow the links through for the badges, and see what I've earned. And I'll show you some of the badges in a second. From my own point of view, I can choose what is seen on the site, and then the badges that I've earned, I can choose whether to share them or not. So if I'm going into a badge, I can say whether I want to make them private or make them public, or I can say, actually, I don't want this badge. If somebody has issued a badge to me that I don't care about, and that goes back into some of the conversations that we had earlier about getting that engagement, making sure that people value these badges. And then if I go to share, I can share this from within the Acclaim site on multiple social media sites, so LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. I can also create links to it that I can embed in emails. I can email the badge out to people. I can download the physical badge itself and upload it to other sites. There are other backpack sites that you can load your badges up onto. So there are multiple ways that I can take my badge and share it with the outside world, all of which are actually really easy to follow, really simple instructions on how to get them onto these sites. From a company's point of view, if we go in and have a look at one of these badges, The badge itself obviously contains all of the metadata that was talked about earlier. So we've got the description of what the badge is, what I've done to earn it, with demonstrated skills about those. Importantly, within here, we've got a link back up to IBM. And when I view it as an individual, I can also see related links. So actually, IBM have put links into all of their badges to take you off to their training center. So you can click this link, go off and see what other badges that you can earn on their actual site. If I follow through and have a look at IBM's page within a claim, it obviously starts off with a little description about who IBM are, with links to their social media areas. But what we can also see in here is we can see a list of all of the badges that they issue. Now, Nina said it was over 1,900. It's now over 2,000 badges that they've issued. So probably in the last month, they've issued another 100 or so badges within the site. All of this is filterable, so I can go and search for badging on here. And as an individual, I can come in and I can search for particular skills that IBM can help me train on and then get those credentials. With any particular badge, as I said earlier, we've got a list of skills. One of the advantages of a claim is that actually these skills can link out, although this is optional, so you don't actually necessarily need to link out from these skills, to a market insights page. The market insights page is actually a job search page, so it allows an individual who has earned a badge to see which skills are applied to that badge, follow the links from those skills, and then go and look for new employment or ways of enhancing their career progression.
It might just be worth jumping in at that point. If there are any organisations on the phone that are presently having a heart attack about the idea that all their staff can now go and search for jobs relevant to the skills, this is an optional part of the system. You can choose to opt out of having it live if you feel that that's perhaps just a little too open to the world. But it does have value for organisations that have a more extended enterprise-based service.
For instance, IBM, the whole point of IBM is that they're not actually trying to retain people. They are trying to train people up in skills that they consider are of benefit to the IBM ecosystem. Yeah. And so people can then go off and search for jobs in the IBM area, not running away from working for IBM themselves. Okay, I mean, that's a very quick summary of what you can see within a claim. I think we'll cut to, if anybody's got any questions, then we're opening to people to type some questions in, and we can answer
so we've got 5 minutes left. So if there's any specific questions that people would like to ask, then and please go ahead. We'll have a quick look at the chat forum, see what we've got up there. June, you've obviously gone down very well with your greenhouse and bottles thing, because I've seen you pop up a few times. So just to pick up on sort of, Rob Miller, you mentioned about charity, the ability to recognise staff, map skills, and sort of development from within. I think you're absolutely spot on in terms of how that can bring value. I don't know whether you were commenting on that just from an internal perspective, but I can imagine as a charity, it also offers you an immense amount of value outside of the immediate organisation with more sort of localised support that you may have on the ground from volunteers who don't sit directly within the charity itself, and the ability to sort of almost certify their capabilities in the way that they're volunteering and supporting you. And also that really opens up the opportunity to promote the brand of your charity as well. So that's absolutely fantastic. In terms of the Robert McClevey, career and succession planning, absolutely spot on again. The key thing with this is to look at what that relationship is between the talent process and learning, making sure that managers are so on board with this and have the right training in place to support their staff in understanding what those more nano or granular skills might be, how they observe or measure those within their teams in a way that then means that those can be converted into credentials without putting your brand or organisation at risk. One of the bits of feedback we commonly get, Robert, around credentialing inside organisation is the genuine fear that people will issue credentials based on their own view of an individual, but not necessarily against a particular standard that makes that organisation feel confident that that person may promote those skills externally, saying that your brand acknowledges that they have these skills. So it is about the standards and making sure that the management have the right training and support to enable that, and that those standards are mapped into your proper career process, performance process. So hopefully just those little snippets are helpful for you both. Is there anybody else in there who's got a question? No multi-skill credentialing for David, apparently. So you can't.
I apologise. It's something I need to train on. That's what it is. I'll get the badge next week.
Brilliant. I'd like to try it out for improved skills, visibility and mobility, clearer career roadmaps, and ultimately better staff retention and acquisition. That's from Karen Conlin. Yes, visibility is a really valuable thing for organisations. It's interesting, we were talking to one of our customers who's fast consumer goods. They've identified that they ultimately they're in a good position in the sector at the moment, but they have the potential to not be in a good position in the future if they don't revolutionise the culture that they operate under at the moment. And so they really needed to do a transformation programme attached to their leadership globally that would help move their leadership onto the right behaviours to make them the leading organisation of their sector in the future. And Credentials formulates a really strong part of that conversation. They were going to do diagnostics globally to sort of understand the difference between where their skills, competencies, behaviours were now within their leadership and management, versus where they needed to be the ultimate organisation moving forward. And then they were able to see that at country, region, team and individual level from the diagnostic. And then they were able to basically create learning experiences attached to the gaps, and then credentials attached to that learning experience. And that was all about really sort of mapping the skills of the future for the organisation that they wanted to be. And of course, that was creating clear career roadmaps. That's harder than I thought it would be. Roadmaps into helping people understand where they sat against the organisational needs. And it was also a much less aggressive way of saying you're not the right person now for the future, but we can actually create the roadmap that will hopefully get you there, which is a much more holistic way of looking at staff rather than thinking we'll just churn them out in exchange for more suitable replacements. So credentialing really helped with that, both from a retention and acquisition perspective. And I think that is probably it. What we will do is, if I've missed anything from the chat forum, we will make sure that we export it out and we'll respond to those points in a follow-up blog for you. And most importantly, thank you all of you for taking the time to listen to us for the last hour. And hopefully we will see you on one of our future events.